Hi, welcome to Connecting Classrooms TV series brought to you by the British Council. In the previous class, we looked at deep learning and critical thinking and problem solving. Today, we'll be looking at the topic creativity and imagination. Please participate actively. All right, let's get started.
Welcome to the British Council Introduction to Core Skills for Teachers. The aim of the course is to discuss and plan ways of integrating core skills teaching and learning into everyday classroom practice. This does not mean changing the curriculum like we mentioned in the first unit. It means adding an extra dimension to what you teach and how you teach it. So we're trying to challenge teachers to think differently about how they teach and about their classroom practices. The key issues and techniques again that we're trying to cover in this TV series includes what do we mean by deep learning? What skills and strategies can promote deep learning? How can we make space in the curriculum for core skills to be developed? What teaching approaches work best to help students develop core skills? How do we get others, such as teachers, head teachers, and parents, to support the embedding of these skills in the curriculum? Because you can't do it alone, you would need the support of others. So, how would you get those supports that you actually require to make this a success? What we expect of you during this TV series and this unit in particular is to think hard about how to apply the core skills to the subjects that you teach. Try to implement some of the new ideas and approaches you have learned in your teaching. Connect with colleagues to share what you're learning and discuss how you're trying out the new ideas. So, in Unit 2, we'll be covering creativity and imagination. So, you need to connect clearly, you need to participate, you need to get your creative juices flowing. You need to start thinking clearly about your classroom practices, what you have done in the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years. Some of us have even been teaching for 15 to 20 years. How creative have you been in the classroom? How have you encouraged the use of your students' or learners' imagination while teaching? How do you design your lesson plans? What do you do in preparation for your class? How are you being creative when you teach? How are you being creative when you ask questions in the class or you take responses from your students? So, we're going to be covering that in this unit. The learning outcomes for Unit 2 includes encouraging creativity and imagination through what if and why questions. How can you encourage creativity using what if and why questions? The second learning outcome is understanding how creativity and imagination work. How do they work? How can you get it to work? And the last learning outcome is modeling creativity and imagination in your classroom. The British Council defines creativity as an economic and social entrepreneurialism, imagining and pursuing novel ideas, judging value, developing innovation and curiosity. And some attributes of creativity includes originality, it has to be imaginative, it has to be purposeful, and then it has to add some value. So it has to be original. You have to add some level of imaginations to it. It has to be purposeful, and then it must have a level of value that it is providing. So when you say creativity or you talk about creativity, these are the attributes of it. So again, let me go over it. You have to think originality has to be original, it has to be imaginative, it has to be purposeful, it has to be valuable. So if you're designing a lesson plan for a class and you want to inject some level of creativity into that class, you then need to think about how original that plan is, how imaginative it is, whether it is purposeful, fit for purpose, and whether it will add value to the learning of the learners. So creativity for Koskis, when we say creative, we don't necessarily mean making a piece of art or literature or a radio program or a movie, for instance. We actually mean finding a new and improved way to do things. Finding a new and improved way to do things. This definition is by Kevin Ashton, who is a British author and entrepreneur. We mean finding a new and improved way to do things. Every time I have the opportunity to work with teachers, I often say to them, why do we teach in the same way almost forever? Why don't we find ways to infuse creativity into what we're doing? So you have been teaching this particular topic for 5 years, and it's the same way. In fact, you've become very predictable. Your students can tell exactly what you will do, how you will do it, when you will do it, and in fact, they can even say why you're doing it. Now, you need to find a new and improved way of teaching your lessons. You need to find a new and improved way of asking questions in the classroom. You just have to. So, because if you start becoming very creative in your lessons, you are indirectly infusing that DNA, if, for want of words, that DNA into your students, into your learners. They leave that class thinking about that lesson, and then you're injecting a sense of creativity into their minds and the use of their imagination as well. So creativity in the classroom for a teacher and for students means finding a new and improved way to do things. I want you to think about these statements. There are four of them. Think about these statements. One, creativity is a natural and exclusively human behavior. Young children, before they begin formal schooling, are highly creative, becoming less and less so as they move through the education system. That particular point is so painful, very painful. You find that as kids, you and I, when we were kids, were very creative. We watch our parents do things. Some of us would gather around, get firewood, get empty cans, and then we start cooking. We want to explore. And some of us were so very mischievous. We'll get our parents' radio sets, dismantle them, and then assemble them back again. We would want to draw. We were so curious. Children have a natural propensity for imagination and creativity. But as we go through the schooling system, children become less and creative, less creative. We want them to do things in a certain way. We no longer want them to play with sand. We no longer want them to, use their imagination. It is do it this way, do it that way, answer this way, answer that way. The third bullet point says, while teachers purport to subscribe to embracing creativity in the classroom, the reality is that they opt for a more controlled environment over the slightly more unpredictable, potentially chaotic one that sometimes comes along with creativity. What that point is saying simply is that teachers would always say that they encourage creativity in the classroom, but when they find that that space where kids and learners can be creative is a bit chaotic, they tend to then move back into the auto mode of trying to stop that flow so that they would have a level of control in the classroom. I think it has to stop. Children, kids, learners must be allowed to use their creative imagination. The fourth and last bullet point says, but creativity doesn't always have to involve chaos. And that's a good point to note. It doesn't always have to involve chaos. And it starts from the way your lessons are planned, dear teacher. It starts from there. How do you plan your lessons? What do you include? What do you expect the kids to do or the learners to do? So I'll take these points again so that it sinks. Creativity is a natural and exclusively human behavior. Young children, before they begin formal schooling, are highly creative, becoming less and less so as they move through the education system. While teachers purport to subscribe to embracing creativity in the classroom, the reality is that they opt for a more controlled environment over the slightly more unpredictable, potentially chaotic one that sometimes comes along with creativity. But creativity doesn't always have to involve chaos. Let's move on. So I have a question for you. Three questions actually. And I'd like you to write your ideas in your notebooks. Okay, write your ideas in your notebook. So I'm going to read out the questions and I'd like you to think as I read them. Just think clearly. The first question: when did you last have a really creative idea as a teacher? This morning, yesterday, last week, last month, last year. When did you last have a really creative idea as a teacher? I mean, a creative idea, not something that you do often. All right, so think about that question. And the second question is a follow up to that one. What was it? What was that creative idea? What was it? The last question is what motivates you to be creative? Think clearly about these questions. I will give you a minute to think about them and then write your answers or your ideas in your notebook. Your time starts now. I hope you're writing. I hope you're thinking about the questions. Your time is running. Again, when did you last have a really creative idea as a teacher? This morning, yesterday, last week, last month, last year. What was it? And what motivates you to be creative? Don't let anything distract you now. I need you to focus. All right? Don't be distracted. So focus and try and answer these questions. A lot of times, as teachers, we don't take time out to think about questions like this. Because the more creative you are, the more you will enjoy your profession. In fact, the teaching profession is supposed to be the epitome of creativity. That is where creativity should, be so buoyant and so exciting as well. And it starts with the way you plan your lessons. If you're not excited about your lesson plan, forget it. The learners will not be excited about that class. Once you find that you've infused a level of excitement through creativity in your lesson plans, you get into that class and find that your learners are so excited, and the excitement lasts well beyond after you have finished that lesson. That's what we're talking about. So, again, when did you last have a really creative idea as a teacher? What was it? And what motivates you to be creative? All right, let's move on to the next slide. Encouraging creativity through whys and what ifs. Through whys and what ifs. I have a question for you. Have you ever had a conversation with a 3-year old who constantly asks, why, why, why? It can be annoying when you're busy trying to do something else, but did you notice that all the why questions make you think differently about things that you usually take for granted? This is a source of creativity. Why questions? Why questions? You tell a kid, you don't have to sit there and the kid says, but why? I'll give you a typical example. So, growing up as a young child, and I'm sure some of us have that experience. Our parents had this very particular, our dads, our fathers had this very particular seat where he is the only one who sits on it. Nobody else dares to sit on it. And there has never been any explanation till date why that happens. And so when you come into the living room, and you're trying to get sit on that seat, the other kids will remind you, that is daddy's seat. Stand up, get out of there. In fact, if you have visitors in the house, the kids would want to tell the visitor not to sit, and the visitor says, "Well," I said, "That's our daddy's seat." So I tried it with my 11-year-old daughter, and I said to her, "Don't sit on that seat." And she says, "Why? There are many seats in the living room. Why? Why shouldn't I sit on?" I said, "That's my seat." She says, "Why would you have a seat? Why? When there are about five?" And I said to her, parents would always want to show that we have superiority or we are superior to our kids. And I said to her, if you sit very close to the television, it will affect your eyesight. And she says, but you wear glasses. So why would it affect my eyesight that I don't wear glasses? And it got me thinking very clearly. And I started to wonder, so why did we allow our parents to do those kinds of things to us growing up? And believing them. Everything our parents said to us, we never questioned. But you see, the why questions gets you thinking, gets you thinking, gets you thinking. And it can be a great source of creativity. All right. And then the final part are what if questions. They're also great for expanding your imagination. You realize that there's this topic I like so much. I think it's in biology where you do the qualities of water. Water is pure, colorless, odorless, tasteless, and all of that. But you see, if you get your students to start asking questions around, what if we add color into it? What if we had a bit of honey? You see, the moment you start asking what if questions, you're becoming creative because the answers to such questions can lead to a mind blowing creation. All of the great inventions you see were born out of these two questions: why and what if? 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 What if we add coloring? What if we add sweetness? And voila, a drink is born. So think about this particular section of this unit. Why questions, what if questions, and begin to imagine how you use these questions in the classroom, or how you allow the learners to also use these questions when you're teaching them. Remember that the best way learning occurs is when students become teachers of their own learning and when teachers become learners of their own teaching. And so you can allow for space where you are quiet and you're listening to the students or learners ask you the questions. Excuse me, sir, excuse me, ma. Why did you say that? What if we look at it from this perspective and you are giving birth to learners who will become very creative and who will go on to inventing mind blowing things? So, again, the why questions, the what if questions are very important if you want to stir up creativity in the classroom. Okay, so I want you to look at this activity, and you don't have to do it if you don't have a partner now. But if you have a partner who is watching with you, it can be a spouse, it can be your child, it can be anybody who is in that space where you're watching this program right now. But if you don't have, you can practice this after you finish watching this lesson. So use this quick activity to explore your own creativity and imagination. So after the program, find a partner and have a conversation that starts with a simple statement. For example, birds fly, or the world is divided into nation states, or children go to school. Just very simple, simple statements. Now, one partner will ask why or what if questions, and the other answers the questions, and then you swap roles. Let's take an example. Birds fly. Why do birds fly? Why? And so that partner who asks that question will wait for response from the other partner who he or she is having this conversation with. And as the person tries to answer the questions, you then ask follow up questions. What if questions? What if we get our laptops, our TV sets to fly? And talking about TV sets, remember growing up, we had these television sets that were very funny. If you looking back in time, you discover that they were very for those ones that were had wooden covers and had wooden legs that our parents treasured so much. That was their biggest treasure. And then every time you wanted to watch a channel, you have to go in and tune and turn the knobs to tune. Or you find that somebody will run under the rain and go outside to turn the area so that you get quality signal. Yeah, right? But that doesn't happen these days. The TV sets are not in those boxes anymore. They are flat screen. In fact, the what if questions have gotten the people who manufacture these TVs to manufacture all sorts of shapes and mind blowing television sets. That's the power that the why questions and what if questions wield. Let's take another example. Children go to school. Now, remember, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed a lot of things, and we are now in the new normal, and education will not be the way it used to be like we know it. So, why should children go to school during the pandemic? Why do you want schools to open up? What if we start working on blended learning? What if we start looking at remote learning? So this is how powerful the why question or the what if questions are. And then you'll be surprised how the conversation will develop. Now, could you use more why and what if questions with your students? That's a question for you. So when you're planning your lessons, start thinking clearly, how do I inject more why or what if questions with my students? How do I use that? How do I teach in the classroom and then use those types of questions in the class as I teach my students? Very exciting stuff, I tell you, very exciting. So what can creativity look like? When we talk about creativity, what can it look like? If I encourage you to think and talk about what you already know about the subject, as well as listen to what others know, you have the opportunity to make connections between ideas in your own unique and original way. That's actually creativity. When there's that opportunity to make connections between ideas in your unique way and in an original way, that's creativity. That's creativity. And that's why when you teach, what I say to teachers is you don't have to spoon feed the students. They have a brain. They can think. They can be very creative, if not more creative than a lot of us who are teachers. That's the truth. Because as young learners, as young people, as as children, they, they don't have any blockages with regards to their creative imaginations. They don't. They are free. They think freely. So you always need to provide an opportunity for them to make connections between their ideas in an original way. You have to provide such opportunities. You have to always provide those opportunities for them. All right. Now, how you knit together your existing ideas with challenging but compelling new ideas is another example of creativity in action. So you allow for the learners to always have the opportunity to knit together their existing ideas with challenging but compelling new ideas. So what do they know? And what are you trying to teach them? Okay. Give them that opportunity to begin to link or knit those ideas together. And lastly, creative thinking comes in when you use thoughts. It's the same thing with critical thinking. All right. So creative thinking comes in when you use thoughts, one and two, in an original, imaginative, purposeful, or valuable way. Creative thinking, I'll take that again. Creative thinking comes in when you use thoughts in an original, imaginative, purposeful, and valuable way. I want to read this again so that it sinks in. What can creativity look like? So if I encourage you to think and talk about what you already know about the subject, as well as listen to what others know, you have the opportunity to make connections between ideas in your own unique way and original way. And we say that that's creativity. So providing opportunity for your learners to make connections between ideas in their own unique and original way. How you knit together your existing ideas with challenging and compelling new ideas is another example of creativity in action. So provide the opportunity for your learners to be able to knit together their existing ideas with challenging but compelling new ideas. And finally, creative thinking comes in when you use thoughts. So how do you encourage thinking in your class? It is the way you have structured your lesson. If you structure your lesson in such a way that your learners are always in thinking mode, that would be a very beautiful experience for them. So it's the way you ask your questions, the way you structure the learning, your learning objectives, and the way you structure the body of your lesson plan and the conclusion of your lesson plan. Even when you give them assignments, those assignments are not assignments that they would have to copy and paste. The assignment forces them to also think. And once you can get them into thinking mode, then they can begin to use thoughts in an original, imaginative, purposeful, or a valuable way, right? So, how do you improve teaching and learning? How do you improve that process? Through creativity. If we think of the creative process as being about finding new and improved ways of doing things, it can be conceptualized in this simple circle. So you plan, you teach, you reflect. You plan, you teach, you reflect. Oftentimes, I find that teachers plan, they teach, but they don't reflect. Now, reflection for anybody, any living human, reflection allows you to think clearly about what you have done and whether you need to improve or make some adjustments. So, for instance, even if you're not a teacher, I stay in the classroom. I go to bed at night. I'm reflecting about that day. What did I do? How did I achieve what I wanted to achieve? So, the cycle is you make a small adjustments to improve things. First iteration of plan. You try it out. You come to teach that lesson with a few people. You don't have to wait for your class. Find somebody and teach that lesson. You think about what worked well and what could be improved further. You evaluate, you reflect, you make another small adjustment, which is the second iteration, and the circle continues. I like to read that again. So you make a small adjustment to improve things, first iteration or plan. You try it out, that lesson plan, try it out, teach it. And then you think about what worked well when you taught that lesson and what could be improved further. So you evaluate and then you reflect and then you make another small adjustment, which is the second iteration. And of course, it's not is that circle just continues and it's a never-ending circle. But what that does to your teaching and lesson is that it keeps improving. It keeps giving it, that's steam that it requires to be a very reflective lesson and very important lesson that enables your learners to become creative in the classroom. So you as a teacher must practice this first. Use your lesson plan as a tool for creativity. Use that to also test your creativity. Find ways to make adjustments, find ways to recreate the lesson plan, improve on it, reflect clearly on the teaching, and then keep making small adjustments. If you practice this over time, you find that you've become so creative that you would not want to teach your lesson in any other way. All right. And then you're creating room for your learners to become very creative individuals as well. So that's what this is about, how you teach and how you infuse creativity into your teaching. And I think it's a very important skill. Like all the other skills are very important. This is actually very important. This one tests directly whether a teacher is creative or not. On a final note, this is an assignment for you. I want you, after you finish watching this unit, to come up with 7 ways you will challenge students to think creatively in your next class. I read that again. Your assignment, make sure you do this assignment. Come up with 7 ways you will challenge students to think creatively in your next class. How would you get them to think creatively? How would you want them to think creatively? All right. So this is an assignment for you. And in the next class can be your remote class. It doesn't have to be the traditional classroom. It can be on a virtual platform. So when you teach online, when you're teaching remotely, whether it's on WhatsApp, on Zoom, at Moodle, whatever platform you use, come up with 7 ways you will challenge students to think creatively in your next class.
Hope you found today's class useful. Thanks for watching and see you in the next class. Bye.